I'm an unlikely Trump supporter. I lived in Mexico for 10 years. I speak fluent Spanish. I speak it better than most Mexican Americans. No, I'm not kidding. Cry about it, guys. I love Mexico and I hope to spend a lot more time there. I love Mexican food more than American food in a lot of cases. Cry about it, you processed garbage eating Velveeta monkeys. And yet, I want the entire US Mexico border patrolled by drones and space marines. If you're debating a leftist who tells you America belongs to the natives, simply tell that person that you agree and that the Aztecs should have protected their borders. The Aztecs don't exist anymore because they didn't protect their borders. So, what's going to happen here is that your leftist interlocutor's brain will cease to function. They simply have never thought about this issue for more than 35 seconds. During my days on the left, I worked with hundreds of illegal immigrants. Like, I was in those communities. I like those people. I live part of every year in Mexico, and yet I want every illegal deported. Why? Why do I want that? I love America, but also because I love Mexico. The longer I pause on this point, the more basic bitches' heads are gonna explode because they can't handle hearing things they've never heard before. And the more time it gives you and I to revel in our own next level genius. Latin American governments send their poor and their criminals to America as a way of taking political pressure off of themselves. If I run a corrupt country and all of the agitators are removed, my fellow politicians can continue plundering the economy. Illegal immigration acts as a pressure release valve for corrupt governments. If we send the illegals back home, Latin governments will be under increased pressure to fix their broken systems. This is something leftists have never considered. Their brains cannot process this information. In her book Open Borders, Inc., Michelle Malkin writes, "The foreign and domestic enemies of America do not believe in borders." This is correct. I was on the left and I can confirm what Michelle writes. You don't have to be a former leftist to know this stuff, obviously. You don't need me to confirm an obvious fact that everybody with a single that everybody with an IEQ above single digits knows, but I'm just saying it anyway. Roughly 30% of my college readings were aimed at deconstructing the notion of borders. Those readings were all produced by the descendants of the Frankfurt School. But as we know, talking about the Frankfurt School makes you an anti-Semite. What an odd thing to say. As I said in the beginning of this video, I'm an unlikely Trump supporter. I'm basically a Bush-Obama-era leftist who was trained to point out all the ways American hegemonic power is illegitimate. The problem is that when you're trained to study hegemonic power, you might end up accidentally finding books like The Israel Lobby and A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, and then you'll notice that the left seized a lot of power and became the very elites who I was trained to attack. They never sent me a memo that we had gained power, so I kept fighting the same people who we wanted to topple during the Occupy Wall Street era, and eventually I realized that the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street had the same enemies. And then I realized that a disproportionate percent of the elites have interesting last names that we cannot talk about on normie social media. When Occupy Wall Street got too close to the truth, the media shifted the narrative and made everything about black people versus white people. And then in 2025, in the summer of 2025, as the left and the right were getting close to getting too close to the truth again, they killed Charlie Kirk and made it about the left versus the right. I'm the only Occupy Wall Street leftist who didn't get distracted after the media shifted the narrative. And I'm one of very few people on the right who, after Charlie Kirk was killed, didn't get distracted after the media shifted the narrative. The enemy is not leftists. The enemy is the same people who we discovered during Occupy Wall Street. The people who have spent the previous 10 years trying to destroy Donald Trump are the same people who every leftist hated in the Bush years. They are the unelected bureaucrats who run not just America, but the entire West. They are the neocons and the neoliberal capitalists. the deep state, the shadow government, permanent Washington. A huge percent of them are members of the ethnicity we can never criticize, and nearly all of them are blackmailed by Jeffstein McEffreys. Today, leftists will pretend the deep state doesn't exist. They pretend it's a right-wing boogeyman. This is because modern leftists realize that their allies completed the long march through the institutions and seized power. Again, leftists will deny that they have institutional power, but when every major corporation forces employees to comply with COVID mandates, when they adopt DEI policies, when they change their social media profile pictures to rainbow flags for Pride Month, when they fire Trump supporters, when they hire unqualified people to fly airplanes simply because those people have fashionable birth characteristics, that's how you know the left has seized power. Now, I should qualify this by saying, yes, everybody who is not an idiot knows that it's not actually about left versus right, it's actually about rich versus poor. But the left will never give up their insane attachment to the worst ideas in the history of mankind. A left-wing person can recognize that the elites need to be catapulted into the sun, but he will put you into that catapult because his TV told him you're a transphobe. We cannot have peace with the left. Like, the left-right dichotomy is a psyop, but at this point, it has become real. Like, it's an egregore or something. We believe that it's real, and so now it's actually real. And there's this thing on the left where they always talk about class warfare. We should talk about class warfare. Okay, let's grant that the left is correct about class warfare. The left openly hates the working class. They have sided with the elites against the working class. When I realized that, I had to pick a side. No normal person can side with the elites against the workers, but that's what the entire left has done. They lied to me and they pretended they cared about working class people, but when Trump came along, they showed their true colors. Trump was not a perfect ally for working class people, but he was 9,000 times better than any other American politician. And again, we have to qualify this by saying before he did all these things to distract us from Jeffrey Epstein, right? Before that, he was better, 9,000 times better than any other American politician. This whole conversation was illegal prior to 2025. Michelle Malkin writes, quote, America First voices are being stifled, squelched, silenced. Globalists are doing everything in their power to deny Donald Trump re-election in 2020. By the way, Michelle wrote that in 2019. Back then, we had no idea how far they would go to destroy Trump, and we had no idea how totally co-opted MAGA would become by the Epsteins and the never-Trumpers like J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel. Michelle continues, the caravan cartel hates Trump. George Soros, the Pope, and the United Nations consider him an evil threat to their billion-dollar migration and refugee enterprises. Antifa wants him dead. The Southern Poverty Law Center and Silicon Valley want to purge every last one of his supporters from the public square. Cultural Marxists and big tech social justice warriors cannot compete on a level playing field of ideas, so they are rigging the game to prevent online Trump supporters from influencing voters and correcting false narratives. Unquote. The elites hated Trump, or at least pretended to, for a long time. Anybody who denies this was not paying attention. Trump's plan to secure America's border infuriated the elites. Even if he was just kidding, it still infuriated them. The elites depend on unlimited, cheap labor from the third world. The elites don't want to pay acceptable wages to Americans. It's easier to just hire illegals because if they complain, you just fire them. What are they going to do? Report you? What are they going to do about it? I know this is obvious to most people, but leftists have no clue that any of this was happening. They live in this safe little bubble where the only things that exist are things that CNN and MSNBC tell them exist. Vote for me and I will imprison everyone who works at CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, all of the BCs, and even Fox. I will replace the anchors with people who actually know what they're talking about. We need to take control of all levers of power, and this includes the media, universities, corporations, everything. It's not enough to just rewrite the script that the media uses and force the current anchors to read it. Those people need to rot in a jail cell for the rest of their lives. But I need your help to make that happen. Vote for me. Democrats and Republicans and corporations all collude to betray America. Michelle writes, quote, "You and I have watched in outrage as hundreds of cities, counties, and states ruled by Democrats and corporate elites openly defy federal immigration agents to provide sanctuary for millions of illegal aliens who provide an unrelenting supply of cheap labor and eventually, after the inevitable bipartisan amnesties, cheap votes." I'm glad she put bipartisan in there because it's Republicans just as much as it's Democrats. Betraying America is the only thing Republicans love more than bombing third world countries that don't allow homosexuality. Obviously, the word betray doesn't apply to Democrats. Like, you can't betray someone if you never pretended to be their ally, you know? And if there's one thing that every American can agree on, it's that Democrats openly hate the nation they live in. She continues, "You and I have watched in outrage as tens of thousands of impoverished and unassimilated refugees from third world and radical Muslim countries are redistributed across our heartland without the consent of the governed, creating cultural ghettos and terror recruitment hotspots that weaponize America's good grace and blind generosity against us." So first, let's talk about her Muslim countries part. Michelle is correct, but she conveniently leaves out the fact that our greatest ally is disproportionately involved in funding migrant caravans and sabotaging our southern border. So these news articles here are obviously about Europe, but if you think our greatest ally isn't doing the same thing in America, you're an idiot. I wonder if perhaps Michelle's husband might have something to do with her selective ignorance. Nah, probably not. By the way, if you didn't know about Michelle's husband before right now, well, you've noticed now. So perhaps this is part of the reason why she ignores that country. When China so much as coughs in America's direction, our big, strong attack dogs like Steve Bannon and Michelle Malkin, they're all over it. But when Israel does much shadier stuff than China could ever dream of, those big attack dogs suddenly stop barking. You'd think Steve or Michelle would point out the hypocrisy of Democrats and Republicans eagerly funding Israel's border wall, but sabotaging America's attempts to build one. Second, she writes, across our heartland, in that passage that I read before, refugees are deliberately placed in red counties. The goal is to sabotage those places. Let's talk about Palestinian refugees in America. Here's a thought experiment. Let's grant Israel the entire territory of Palestine. Let's just do it. Let's ignore the fact that the Holy Land belongs to the followers of Christ. Okay, so now Palestine belongs to Israel and they can do whatever they want. Where should the Palestinians go? The typical practice for refugees is to go to the nearest safe nation. So this means Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Lebanon or Syria or Turkey or Iraq or Jordan or Yemen or Oman or Eritrea or Georgia or Azerbaijan. It does not mean America, and yet Donald Trump has suggested that we bring them here. Is this what we voted for? Guess what Israel thinks of this? Israel wants Palestinians to go to Ireland. Okay, but we're talking about Michelle Malkin's book. Third, she says, weaponize America's good grace and blind generosity against us. When we do Israel's bidding by funding their war after we learned that they deliberately allowed October 7 to happen, as Charlie Kirk himself said, and then when we take war refugees they created with our money, we are having our generosity weaponized against us. I know that's a poorly worded sentence. I apologize. Here's a better one. Here's a better way to phrase it. 1, we fund Israel's war. 2, we continue funding them after we learned that they allowed October 7 to happen because they wanted a justification for war. 3, we take displaced Palestinians and put them in red states. If you don't understand the depths of depravity going on here, there's a Bible verse that might describe you. The Lord has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts so that their eyes cannot see and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and have me heal them. You need to turn to the Holy Spirit and pray for discernment. But Israel is not the only villain in this story. They are a major player in these affairs, but they are not the only bad actor. However, we must not stick our heads in the sand when we learn that our greatest ally has taken actions against us on the geopolitical chessboard. Geopolitics is a game, and our greatest ally plays the game with a set of rules that are borderline incomprehensible when it comes to the whites. Like, we can't understand the rules that they play with. Michelle Malkin and her MAGA allies have no problem naming most of our enemies: George Soros, the late Pope Francis, Antifa, China, Southern Poverty Law Center, Hollywood, the media, nonprofits, Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison, Nancy Pelosi, AOC, Hope Not Hate, Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders, Catholic Charities, No More Deaths, on and on and on. But they get scared when they hear about the crimes of our greatest ally. They get most of their historical information from Hollywood movies. In the mind of MAGA voters, criticizing Israel is the same as firing up gas chambers and machine gunning babies in the air like clay pigeons. MAGA voters actually believe the machine gunning babies thing, by the way. Fucking retards. What do you expect from people who believe Israel's lie that Hamas beheaded 40 babies? There are smart people on the right, but rank and file MAGA voters, they're difficult to love.